Melanie from the International English Library, and it is my pleasure to introduce our special guest today, Clare Westmacott. We are thrilled to have invited you here to the International Library offices to share the story of your grandmother's diary. This is a very special project that Clare has embarked upon. Next Friday, the 10th of December, will mark the 81st anniversary of the first entry of your grandmother's diary to her daughter, that she wrote for her daughter. You started publishing the entries on the day they were written 80 years later. That's last right. year. Yes. In a special project that's being shared on a blog and also on Instagram and Twitter. Yeah. And so it launched exactly 1 year ago last week, and we will be sharing in the chat box the link to the blog site. So Clare, a little bit of background of how the project came to be.
Well, after my parents had died, I got the diaries. I knew they existed, but I'd never actually done anything with them. Decided to translate them into English, which I did. Tried to find a suitable publisher without any success, although they did write, each one said, this is lovely, but it's not for us. And so eventually, this is about 25 years ago, that was the end of it. It was only when I came to talk about it to Jürgen that really he had this idea that it was worth making the effort and getting this blog up and running. So that's how it started. Yeah.
So it was partially a joint collaboration.
Absolutely.
With Jürgen inspiring you to take that next step. I suppose one of the things that we should qualify for people that haven't had a chance to look at the blog or the story yet, that your mother was based in Cologne during the war.
My grandmother.
Your grandmother was based in Cologne.
Yes, and my mother was in England.
And her daughter, Lotte, your mother, had moved to England in 1936 before the war.
Yes.
So they were separated during the war years. And Clara wrote the diaries for Lotte, her daughter.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Yes. So beginning to translate them, how was it translating? How long did that take you?
Well, it took quite a long time. The thing was, like when I began, people didn't have the computers in their homes, but I had access to a computer where I worked in the hospital. And so my lunch breaks, I would work on it. I couldn't translate every word. Some of it was very, very difficult. But I did what I could and got most of it. Then you get used to reading, seeing the script actually. And so, yes, it took, I couldn't say how long, it took a long time anyway, till I got to the end of it.
And the idea to publish them on the day they were written 80 years later?
That was Jürgen's idea. So I follow his instructions. And yes, seemed like a very good idea. So that, that's how it started.
And the family tree. So Lotte wasn't an only child.
That's right. She had two brothers. My mother was born in 1912, my uncle Walter in 16, and my uncle Ruby in 20.
So she was the middle child between two brothers?
No, she was the oldest.
Oh, she was the eldest.
Yes.
Oh, so Walter was next and then came
Ruby. 4 years apart, each of them. And they lived in Cologne. They had a very nice life, very high standard of living. But my mother decided she didn't want to do some compulsory kind of thing during the Nazi regime for young women. So she went to England for a year as an au pair. And she met my father there playing cricket. He was playing cricket. And then I was born, that's mentioned in the diaries. And then my brother was born in 1943. But she didn't she never saw her father again. He died in 46. And, but my grandmother lived quite some time after that and lived up on the farm where Jürgen's family farmed. So that's the link between all of us. Yes.
Jürgen, who is helping you with this project,
exactly.
And your mother.
Yes.
Family, which is why you are like family with Jürgen now.
No, exactly.
I do see there are some pictures going through. Your grandfather was an artist.
Yes, and he or as I say, they lived in Cologne. He was quite a prominent artist. He did a lot of religious paintings, actually, and also paintings, for example, the Berlin Opera House, ceiling paintings, also Cologne, and in, I think in Freiburg, also some ceiling paintings from various places.
Do they still exist?
No, they were all destroyed.
During the war?
During the war, yes. And he also did works, some of which went to America, to monasteries in America, but I don't know what happened to them. And the paintings that we have personally are family paintings, basically. And then the Stadtmuseum in Cologne has some too.
Yes. Some of the pictures, people that you're seeing here tonight, there's at least 3 that are in the Cologne Stadtmuseum's collection. So moving on to your grandmother's diary that she was writing for your mother, Lotte, and the stories that she's telling. She took a big risk, didn't she, in keeping these diaries?
Oh, absolutely. It's staggering, actually, how she dared to write the stuff that she did. Well, I know that one of my uncles knew. They probably both did know she was writing it. But I did read some years ago about somebody else who kept a diary, but he buried it in the garden so that nobody would know it was being written. But clearly she didn't do that. It was so she was very brave, if not slightly foolish, actually. Sorry.
No, continue.
No, just it makes for very good reading. So the family situation and the war situation and the political situation are all very, very well drawn, I think, in this in her diary.
Absolutely. I think we were discussing earlier and last week when we were preparing for this presentation that there are 3 or 4 aspects to the story, each as intriguing as the other. One is your personal story of discovering the diaries and figuring out what to do with them. And then the second part of the story is obviously the story of the diaries themselves, which are so intimate. It is a mother writing to her daughter who she's completely cut off from by war, and it was running a risk even keeping a diary with the hope that she would get to the diary one day.
Yes, absolutely.
So did you ever have the chance to discuss with your mother when she got the diaries?
No, I rather suspect she didn't actually ever read them. And thinking about it, I think it was because once they were able to see one another, what I do remember was the 2 of them talking and talking and talking and talking. So I imagine that my mother got all this information
verbally,
yes, absolutely,
through conversation rather than
I mean, that was for years. It's the thing I remember, particularly about them just talking, and so I'm sure she knew all about this and didn't really need to read them.
But did your mother come back to Germany after the war?
No.
Or did she always remain living in England?
Yes, my father was English. So she came over regularly on holiday and so on to visit my grandmother. But no, she stayed in England. In fact, she became an English citizen when she got married.
Oh, and so you were raised English?
Yes, absolutely. People ask whether I was bilingual. Well, no, because it was not a very good time to be speaking German till 1946, 7, 8, when I first came here. So no, we were not brought up to be bilingual.
So at what stage did you learn German well enough to translate the diaries?
Time, really. I spent a lot of time on this farm of Jürgen's where nobody spoke English, so I really had got to learn. And then I spent a year in Switzerland, working in a hospital in Switzerland, German-speaking Switzerland. And that, I think, really, really sort of, because I had nobody else to talk to, except in German. So I think that sort of helped.
Fast-tracked language acquisition.
Yes.
Now, before we're keeping everybody in the dark about the diaries, Claire has very kindly agreed to do a reading for us today from the diaries. So I would pass over directly to Claire now to do the readings, and then we might have a bit of a discussion afterwards, and people will have more of a sense of the diaries and their tone and just how remarkably intimate they are and what story they tell. So Claire,
all right,
I'll let you come.
Thank you. So I called this In My Grandmother's Footsteps because I felt I was following her footsteps in recording this. So the start is the 10th of December, 1940. And now I am completely alone, but today they've taken Walter away as well. In spite of the fact that over and over again, they reassured him, you are second reserve unit, you will not be needed. But after 6 months war and a reorganization, Walter's unit became first reserve. That was supposed to be a long way off from call up as well. Nevertheless, I feared the day would come. The boys answered my unspoken fears. No, mother, it will be ages before we're called up, said Ruby, so don't worry. And so they both continued with their studies, Walter at the university and Ruby at the Academy of Art. Soon the holidays came and already we'd had a year of war. It was almost a year since you and I had said goodbye to one another, a time so hard and bitter for me to bear. Duties filled up most of my time and gradually the small and large restrictions to our lives increased. And now one can only get things with coupons, even clothing coupons. There are substitutes for everything, even toilet soap. There is no coffee and little butter. Fat and meat are becoming scarcer. We had not stored potatoes as we had been assured that there were plenty. And then came a severe frost and all the potatoes that had not gone rotten went to the military. What could one do? Very little, really. And potatoes are so important to be able to feel full. So I had to think about how I should get some. There was nothing in the city. So what to do? Well, not for nothing had I spent years walking in the countryside and I had made friends there. They would help me. And so often I went from door to beg them to sell me what they could spare. Sometimes I failed, but often I succeeded. Usually I paid with money, but sometimes I had to trade. So I searched through my things and took the farmers' gifts. And then I got potatoes, eggs, fruit, and sometimes poultry. 1 week after another, I walked into the Bergische Land to lonely farms, getting what I could, and slowly the winter passed. Often I got enough to give to others who were suffering. Mostly I helped the Reinemans. Bully often went with me, and we carried the potatoes in our rucksacks. In the spring, there were more eggs, and so I bought all I could. I preserved any left over. The Reinemans were neighbours of my grandmother, and Bully was my mother's best friend. Then came another blow, Walter's call-up papers. In spite of everything, like many mothers who had clung to their sons, I had no choice. And so on the 10th of December, Walter had to go as well. So I have begun to write all this down on the day Walter was taken away, in the hope that one day we can relate it all to one another together. 14th of December, a couple of things I must tell you about before the boys went. We had one air raid after another. Praise God, we had withstood them. All the time I thought of you. How often have I tried to get news of you? I have written to the Red Cross, and every time the reply from the Foreign Department is the same, no news. I had given it up and left it in God's hands because I thought it might be making things difficult for you. When one day in October, after my beloved Ruby's call up, and I was feeling so lonely and abandoned, what lay in the letterbox? A letter. Good God, from Lotte. I went hot and cold. I opened the letter and I read it over and over. How I thank God for news of you at last. I went as fast as I could to Bully to tell her about the fate of her dear friend in the north. There was so much news in your letter, above all that you have become a mother. And to think that I could not be with you. And you will have had your baby all alone with no one who could speak your language. 27th of March, 1941. The day before yesterday, I got a summons from the Gestapo, and this morning I went. A young man from the SS asked me if I had dealings with enemy countries. I was astonished at first and denied it. He then became coarse and crude and aggressive, but I protested my innocence. As things became clearer, I realized it was a letter from you which had made me a suspect. I wanted to have that letter, and there followed quite an argument, but in the end it was all right, and I departed with my letter. Naturally, I was forbidden to tell anyone what had happened. We've gone so far here that we can't get the most harmless news from our loved ones without suspicion. The black market thrives just as it did in the First World War. Coffee is 30 marks a pound, fat and butter cost a fortune, and yet those who can afford it can have everything. Soon I will not be able to get anything in the country either, because things are beginning to get difficult there as well. I walked for hours yesterday to all the isolated farmhouses, and from most of them I got nothing. 22nd of June, 1941. Now our so-called politicians have earned them something for themselves, a Russian declaration of war. Even this week they were saying that we will have the Ukraine for 99 years, and Stalin was expected to visit Berlin. I laughed at all this rubbish, and they all pointed the finger when I said I would never believe in a Russian friendship, and that a Russian-English alliance was much more likely than one with us, and so it is. I believe an English-American alliance is more likely than anything else. One of these days, we will experience an invasion such as Hitler, with his tiny brain, cannot ever have imagined. Those mad big shots and their henchmen have led the German people by the nose, and the poor people have to pay the price for what these adventurers have set in motion. 23rd of June. I've just got back to my room. It is very hot and I feel exhausted from all the trailing around the isolated farms for a couple of eggs, or often trailing around to get no eggs at all. But this time I got 15. It happened like this. A farmer's wife who was about to deliver her baby gave me the job of restoring her battered old pram. And my darling, I, who in these matters am so impatient and lacking in the skills of restoration, let alone of panel beating, managed to do the job to the satisfaction of the farmer's wife. It took me a whole morning in dreadful heat, and for that I earned 15 eggs. I've divided them into 5 for your father, 5 for the Reinemans who are so good to me, and 5 for me. 23rd of August, 41. Today I saw the Jews on the streets wearing their Star of David badges, yellow background with Jew written on it. All of them, even the children have to wear them. I don't see what good that is going to do. It will only cause bad feelings even among decent people. People shake their heads in disbelief at these petty regulations. Nobody knows what the reason for it can be. Today I went to the post box to collect the letters, and there was a letter from Ruby. I opened the letter and Ruby wrote briefly and to the point. He was about to set off for Russia. My God, Lotte gone and Ruby in that terrible hell. What more can come to hurt me? Christmas Eve, 41. Ruby's here once again, and we three, Walter, Ruby and I, sat around the Christmas tree with our thoughts. We thought about you a lot, and we all consoled ourselves with the thought that this must end sometime. At the moment, Ruby's doing impersonations with secret senior officers, and we have laughed so much this evening, but I can't illustrate them for you, apart from reminding you of his teacher Kopfmann, whom you must remember. And now I go in spirit to you and your family to celebrate Christmas. Your child is more than a year old and will be fascinated by the tree. How time passes. Yesterday I went to the Reinemans. Bully is getting thinner and thinner because she doesn't get enough to eat. If it goes on, she will go to nothing. People say that the Russians are so hungry they are eating their dead comrades. Isn't that dreadful? Yes, well, we ourselves have nothing either, and even less to spare for prisoners. Bully says she's frightened that she might end up in her mother's pea soup. 1st of March, 42. The winter has been the hardest and longest for 150 years. It is terribly cold and we have no heating. The misery is awful. Outside one sees little children without decent shoes. We eat less and less, and Walter and I have 2 small meals a day to make the food last longer. Even so, if I didn't have friends in the country, we would have even less. 10th of March, 42. I'm very worried about Ruby. The poor boy volunteered to go to Africa to avoid going to Russia again. Now he's in the Landau in Pfalz getting ready to go. Today I tried again to get some shoes. No peace, no food, no shoes. 2nd of April, 42. The farmers have been forbidden, even under threat of death, to let the starving city dwellers have anything. So I have to go in great danger into the Bergische Land to get anything. I go on the loneliest woodland paths, avoid getting caught. The penalty is the chop. So we were sitting here and Easter nearly here with nothing. The bitterness increases, but no one dares to grumble. 5th of June. One of the Nazi big shots, Heydrich, has been blown up in Prague. I hope the rest of them soon go the same way. 26th of October, 42. Yesterday I went to the cathedral as the Archbishop was giving his first pontifical address. The Archbishop is our former parish priest. You will remember him, Dr. Frinks. When I got to the cathedral, what a sight. The cathedral square, as far as the Reichsrathterrasse, was solid with people. The Nazis will not have liked it at all. But our Archbishop, as he arrived in his carriage, the crowd spontaneously began to shout, "Heil our Archbishop." 8th of November. They have been 42. They have been saying here for a long time that soon they are going to attack the island, England. And when they do, they will destroy everything within 8 days. People express their pity for me, that I have a daughter living there, but I have to laugh silently about it and think, you poor fools. Or sometimes I lose patience with them and give them a piece of my mind. I often wonder why it is that I'm not sitting in a concentration camp. Christmas 42. Yes, Christmas, saddest of all festivals for me. This time I was all alone. On Christmas Eve, I went to your father's, but this evening of all evenings would be equally difficult for us both. As I arrived, he said to me, do you know already? No, what is it then? He gave me a card that he had sent to Ruby. It had been returned, stamped, receiver missing. I had to sit down before my knees gave way. What I had so long feared had become true. Maybe in the near future, we will hear even worse news. To think that my dear boy, my favorite, may not be alive anymore. Dear God in heaven, do not let this be true. I immediately wrote letters to everywhere I could think of for information. Up to now, I've had no news. I've been everywhere to get information. Robert Kernish, the OKW officer, says he's probably a prisoner of the English. In the meantime, I wait and enjoy the uncertainty and imagine the most dreadful things and have no peace. How happy I would be if he were a prisoner of the English, and then I would have the hope of seeing him again, of having him with me again, and I would thank God on my knees. I would enjoy anything this happy war could visit upon me. 9th of January, 43. I had already written to the OKW and the Red Cross and been told nothing. And then today I got this news. Your son, Private Robert Seuffert, is an English prisoner of war. A stone fell from my heart. He's alive. He's out of the hell. I am so happy. I thank his and my creator. I have the chance of seeing him again, even if it takes time. I long for the day when I hear from him personally, if he is healthy and how he's doing. 10th of February, 43. I don't hear any more from Ruby. They have told me he will be taken from Egypt to Canada, and now I'm terrified something may happen to him on the way there. Now Walter is in danger, and I worry very much about him. Your father is and will remain the same, egotist through and through. 26th of April, Easter Tuesday. I went to try to find a room in the country because I want to rest a bit there and have somewhere for the boys. I got a room in an old castle, Ereshofen, from a Baron G. But it was not as easy as it sounds. Maybe one day I will be able to tell you all about it. Anyway, I need somewhere where I need not be disturbed. I go there to sleep often, and however bad it gets, I can sleep there at night. I'm completely alone in my house and can't sleep there at night anyway. So today I went to my room at Ereshofen. It rained heavily on the first day, but I went into the woods and spent hours walking there. I felt very lonely and wondered what would become of me. And so it goes on, the waiting, the worrying, suffering, and the war. 13th of May, 43. Herr Rommel received for his duties in Africa the highest order that swine can give, a decoration with diamonds. Yes, with diamonds. The big shots have similarly reported themselves, so that if it all goes wrong, they can find somewhere in the world where they can forget their crimes in peace. But the only worry they have is they might not get there. 29th of November 43. And now to something else. At the beginning of November, I came down from Ereshofen and into our house to have a look at everything. And in the letterbox was a card with the following contents. I have returned from an English POW camp as an exchange POW where I was with your son, indeed in his billet. Your son sends greetings. He is well, he is healthy. If you would like to know more, I'm at your disposal. I went there, presumably to brigade headquarters, but he had left that morning for Berlin, where his parents were. But as he had to return to the army, he will be back in 14 days. You can imagine how I counted the days, and after various problems, I finally got to see him. He said that Ruby was well and that he was allowed to work as an artist. And they had given him a studio to work in. Everyone likes him, although, as the young man said, he is definitely not cut out to be a soldier. Well, I said, he is cut out to be an artist, and for that I am glad. In me lives a longing, and that is for you three. Throughout these 4 years, I have lived in fear. Fear for Ruby, fear for Walter, fear for Lotte. 3rd of March, 44. Walter has gone again. Whilst he was home, Frau Janssens brought her husband to see us. He'd been discharged because of a leg injury. It was good to see them. But what on earth was I going to give them to eat? This was up at the Schloss. But our soldiers know how to look after themselves. They're used to it. There is a moat around the castle full of fish. Our two heroes saw this, and already their mouths were watering. They wanted fish. I tried to dissuade them, but soon they had disappeared. An hour later, Walter surfaced in my room. Well, I said, have you caught any fish for our evening meal? We have got fish, mother, but we need something to carry it in, so no one knows what we have done. It is a carp of at least 10 pounds in weight. We caught it with a pitchfork. I was terrified. Imagine if anyone had seen them. Oh, God. Anyway, I had to agree to help them, and soon they were there with their booty. It was a wonderful carp, not 10, but 18 pounds in weight. Fortunately, we were alone that afternoon, and so we began preparing and cooking the fish. For butter, we used the butter we had got for the whole of the next week. We decorated the table nicely, and we set to eat the giant fish, which was at least 10 pounds in weight, ready for the table. Unfortunately, I could not eat a lot. I was nearly full from cooking it. But our two fish robbers ate until they couldn't move, and everything had gone. I think it was the first time they had been full since the war began. Walter could not sleep for overeating. And so the story had a happy ending. Our heroes had stolen with care and consideration. 18th of November, 1944. In the evening, I spoke to an officer who came from Cologne. Herr Offizier, were you on duty? Yes. What does Braunsfeld look like? Appalling. It's not there anymore. The Aachener Strasse has gone as well. In everything, the whole of Braunsfeld is a bomb crater, and that is where their home was. Can I go with you tomorrow? Yes. Be ready at 3 in the morning. I was ready on time, and off I went to Cologne. Would my house still be standing? Would the Reinemans be alive? I went across the bomb craters to Voigtstrasse. Not a house was standing. I went slowly towards Witthauserstrasse. The Krauthäuser's house was a pile of rubble. And then I got a view of my house, a smoking ruin. I went up to the house. In the garden was a burnt out incendiary canister. Everywhere death. 15th of November, 44. Today I received a letter from Frau Reinemann. It was very disturbing. I tried to get to Cologne as soon as I could, and with great difficulty I got to Braunsfeld. I knocked on the door, and when they heard my voice, the door was happily opened to me. Frau Reinemann fell weeping round my neck, followed by Elfriede, the faithful soul. Then they told me their sorry tale. Bully and Herr Reinemann had been arrested by the Gestapo. On Sunday morning, they were sleeping in late. Herr Reinemann had gone to Odenthal to rest for a few days. Elfriede had gone home to her mother. So the two, mother and daughter, were alone and in bed when there was a knock on the door. Who is it? The Gestapo. Open the door. They opened the door. Is your husband here? No. Have you got weapons? No. Where is your husband? In Odenthal. But why are you here? To arrest you and your husband. Get dressed. Bully leapt out of bed. Arrest me, but not my mother. The door opened and another official came in. And whilst the door was open, they could see that the people in the house opposite had been arrested and being taken away. There had been French people who, in the most terrible time, had stayed at the house opposite and slept there. Later, the owner of the house had, out of sympathy, taken in another person whom she believed to be a compatriot of these people, but who in fact was an informant for the Gestapo, and he'd betrayed them. They were arrested and taken away, as well as another family on the street, and Bully, who was taken in her mother's place. They have been gone now for 4 weeks for questioning. Herr Reinemann was arrested on the Tuesday after he returned home from Odenthal. He was accused of having given the Frenchman a revolver. He couldn't deny it because it was true, but not for the reasons they were implying. Night after night, robbers and looters came to do their dirty work, and no one was safe. As Herr Reinemann was away a lot, he gave the gun to the youngest Frenchman so he could take care of the street. That was all. And for that, they're now sitting in prison. I comforted her as much as I could, but what use of words? Bully had not done anything, and yet she must have done something. They had wanted to arrest the mother, but that was Bully's greatest terror. Could it be that her mother had done something? I don't know. Anyway, they've been under arrest for nearly 5 weeks now, and there's still no solution. In the morning, they get 2 pieces of dry bread, the same in the evening, and at midday they get a watery soup. They have to work during the day, and at night they freeze and have no protection from the air raids. God knows what will happen. Frau Reinemann, with Elfriede's help, has got a good lawyer. It is only with the greatest good fortune that they manage to find someone who take on the case and who has the courage to fight the Gestapo. The poor, poor people. And that was the last entry of all in the diary.
And just to recap on the date of that entry, that was in 1944. In
1944.
Sorry, Claire.
Yeah, it's all right. It was October, wasn't it? Yeah,
Yes,
October, yeah. 44.
It's just a truly remarkably in-depth, intimate, special collection of writing. And she was a very talented writer.
She was.
Thank you very much for joining us. For more information, I'd like to remind people that the website, there will be a link to the diary website attached to information sent out afterwards about this reading.